The story I'm going to tell you today took place in Louisiana, in the southern United States, bordering the Gulf of Mexico to the south. This state is renowned for its rich history and unique cultural traditions, blending French, Spanish, and African influences. In southeastern Louisiana lies a peaceful town called Slaughter, surrounded by vast, endless fields and beautiful rural landscapes. The town's economy revolves around agriculture, with most residents engaged in farming and livestock raising. Though its population is under 900, the people here are close-knit and harmonious, forming a warm community. Naturally, such a friendly town has attracted many outsiders to settle there, including the Fletcher family. This affluent family consisted of 3 members. The father, Clay Fletcher, 65 years old, was an official with the Civil War Roundtable, a non-profit organization that meets 3 weeks a month. This group focuses on researching and discussing the American Civil War, with members including historians, scholars, enthusiasts, and researchers interested in the war, its events, and its figures. His wife, Sheila Fletcher, 64, was a town council member with an extensive and diverse social network, well known to many. The couple had a daughter named Lacey Fletcher, 36, whose health was poor due to multiple illnesses. Unable to work, she stayed home to recuperate. The family lived on East Tom Drive in Slaughter, in a 2-story house with a lovely yard and swimming pool. The entrance was a cement driveway lined with gravel, surrounded by shaded woods and a spacious lawn. Neighbors were spaced far apart, offering a private, serene, and almost poetic lifestyle. This successful couple were devout individuals, attending the local church weekly for prayers and earning widespread respect. Beyond their daily work, they enjoyed fishing, jogging, and traveling, though they sometimes stayed home to care for their daughter. Yet, within this seemingly normal family, an unbelievable event unfolded. Next, let's rewind to January 3rd, 2022, to uncover the details of what happened. On January 3rd, 2022, it was a Monday, and winter in Louisiana. Compared to other regions, the weather here was sunny enough, with daytime temperatures not too low. Clay and Sheila Fletcher were returning home early that morning along the quiet rural roads of Slaughter. The cold night sky loomed overhead, dotted with twinkling stars stretching into the distance, while the roar of their car engine echoed across the silent fields. Soon they arrived at their home on East Tom Drive. They parked behind the garage, walked across the lawn, and approached the front door. Unlocking it with a key, they stepped inside casually. The house was dark, so they flipped the wall switch to turn on the lights. They then walked down the hallway, heading to their bedroom to rest. As they passed the living room, they were struck by a shocking sight. Their daughter Lacey lay motionless on the couch, appearing lifeless. Sheila dropped to her knees beside her daughter and burst into tears. Overwhelmed with grief, they quickly dialed 911 for emergency help. 2 hours later, emergency responders arrived at the house. Clay and Sheila were waiting outside. Seeing the responders, they hurriedly explained, "We went away for the weekend, leaving our daughter Lacey at home. When we got back, we found her lying on the sofa, not breathing." They added, "Her health has always been poor. She never went outside and suffered from locked-in syndrome, or LIS. It's a rare neurological disorder that causes complete or near-complete loss of movement and speech, with no control over muscles. She could only communicate with the outside world through her eyes or nonverbal means. Though her body couldn't move, her consciousness, thinking, and perception remained intact." They further clarified, "We've left her home alone during past trips without issues, but this time something went terribly wrong. As the responders entered, they sensed something bizarre. The air was thick with a nauseating stench, like a public restroom. In the living room, they saw Lacey on a brown leather sofa, her hips sunken into its crevice, surrounded by feces and urine, as if she'd been there for ages. Her condition was startling. She wore only a short blue floral t-shirt that didn't fully cover her chest, clearly ill-fitting. Her body leaned heavily to one side, legs crossed, right arm draped over her chest, brown eyes wide open, mouth slightly ajar, revealing neatly aligned upper teeth. Her body was covered in red sores, smeared with feces on her face, hair, ears, and skin, marked by mosquito bites. The sores and wounds were severely infected, exposing bone. Maggots crawled over her necrotic wounds, gnawing at her flesh. This horrifying, unprecedented scene left the responders terrified and nauseated. Unable to bear it, they immediately confirmed on site that Lacey was dead, requiring no further aid. Minutes later, a piercing siren shattered the quiet night in the sleepy town. A large police force arrived, sealing off the area. Dr. Ewell DeWitt Bickham III, the coroner, soon joined them, and the official investigation began. Apart from the sofa where Lacey sat, the rest of the house was neat and clean, yet the air reeked with an unbearable stench. The sofa was positioned against a wall with a low black table in front, cluttered with items: wet wipes, talcum powder, commonly used in cosmetics and personal care products like foundation or baby powder, nasal spray, moisturizer, a lidded box, and a childhood photo of Lacey. These were likely used by Clay and Sheila to clean their daughter. On the floor between the sofa and table were 2 old DVDs, their covers indicating children's movies, perhaps one of Lacey's few entertainments. Beside the sofa stood a gray wardrobe stuffed with Lacey's clothes, neatly stacked. Nearby was a simple portable toilet. Since Lacey couldn't move, the sofa area was her daily living space. At her death, she weighed just 43.5 kilograms, 96 pounds, far below average for an adult European woman. The coroner's report revealed Lacey suffered from multiple conditions: eczema, bacterial infections, pressure sores, COVID-19, severe malnutrition from prolonged starvation, and sepsis from osteomyelitis, bone infection. These combined factors caused her death, estimated to have occurred 24 to 48 hours before discovery. Her stomach contained sofa foam and bodily waste. Dr. Bickham questioned the locked-in syndrome diagnosis, noting that such patients can't eat independently and rely on others. If true, Lacey endured immense physical torment in her final days. When found, her back and hips were blackened beyond recognition, with large sores on her buttocks and thighs mixed with feces and sofa foam. Her body was fused to the leather cushion as if melted into it. The sofa was severely deformed, its backrest worn thin, the brown leather on the armrests and back faded and peeling. Forensic experts believed Lacey had lived on that sofa for months, possibly years. Medical records showed she was diagnosed with severe autism, fearing social interaction and avoiding the outdoors. After the incident, police interrogated the couple to understand why their daughter ended up in such a state. They claimed, "We always cared for her diligently, regularly cleaning her and providing food." Sheila added, "Her health worsened over time. She refused to leave the living room or the sofa, even to use the bathroom. So, we laid towels on the sofa to absorb her waste." They explained, "We didn't take her to a doctor because she refused medical visits. When alive, her spirits were good. Though mobility was limited, she wasn't completely immobile and could shift if uncomfortable." Investigator Sam DeQuila expressed skepticism, believing Lacey endured extreme suffering before dying. likely due to parental neglect or abandonment to relieve their burden. Dr. Bickham later spoke with journalist Ashley Banfield on News Nation's Banfield, saying, "When I entered, the house reeked of a chilling stench, feces, waste like a sewer or septic tank mixed with death. I'd never smelled anything like it." Approaching the body, she was essentially sitting in a pit of liquid feces and urine. "I've handled decomposed bodies, faced all kinds of death and decay, but never this in my career. I've never seen a human tortured, literally, and allowed to die when she could have lived." Lacey wasn't decomposing. She was rotting in her own body, in that pit, on that couch. "It's one of the most heinous, horrific crimes I've encountered." He added, "After examining her, I couldn't sleep or eat for a week. This was the worst case of medical neglect I've ever seen. No adjective or phrase can fully describe it." She died after at least a decade of medical abandonment. I recall their faces at the scene. Clay was utterly indifferent, as if the deceased wasn't his daughter. Sheila bowed her head between her knees, showing mild sorrow with a few meaningless tears. "My gut told me something was off, unlike the grief I've seen in other cases. There was no evidence of proper feeding, just a small bag of hard candy nearby. Her stomach held yellow sofa foam and feces." Clay worked for a nonprofit, and Sheila was a council member with broad connections across all walks of life. They had ample financial resources to treat Lacey's mental and physical health issues, or hire a caregiver if they'd wanted to. Yet they attributed her immobility to psychological factors, assuming she simply didn't want to leave the sofa and was physically fine despite mental struggles. Sheriff Jeffrey Travis, speaking after the incident, said, "I've been sheriff here for 6 years and seen a lot, but this is the worst case I've encountered." Other investigators reported sleeplessness and loss of appetite due to the trauma from the case's horrific nature. Lacey, born in 1986 in Louisiana, was 36 at her death. After high school, she stayed home with her parents, rarely venturing out. 27 years earlier, in 1995, the family moved to Slaughter, settling into their 2-story home on East Tom Drive. At 19, Lacey was lively and charming, quickly befriending local kids. In 1997, as a teenager, she attended a church high school, still healthy, enjoying sports, and playing on the volleyball team. Classmates saw her as sweet and kind. But at some point, friends noticed changes. She seemed uninterested in typical teen topics, clinging to childhood interests like Disney dolls. Feeling different from peers, she grew withdrawn, developing insecurity and anxiety. The last time friends saw her was in her junior year. In a class photo, her radiant face blended with peers. Anyone would think she was a normal, happy girl. But she never returned to school after that graduation shot. Post-school, Lacey stayed home, homeschooled by her parents, who told others she'd been diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, a condition reclassified by the World Health Organization in 2021 as part of autism spectrum disorder, ASD. ASD involves poor social and communication skills, isolation, few friends, narrow interests, and repetitive behaviors, though language and intellect develop normally. Lacey faded from public view, seldom seen, her life revolving around therapy visits and home. Her last recorded medical visit was in 2001, 21 years earlier at age 16, with no updates on her condition since. She stopped visiting doctors or leaving home until the morning of January 3, 2022, when the case gripped public attention, marking it as the strangest, cruelest, and most inexplicable incident in Slaughter's history. The community was outraged at the couple's actions, questioning why Lacey's years-long illness went untreated, worsening to such a tragic end. Many blamed their neglect. John Potts, a colleague of Clay's, said, "We respected them at the organization, but no one knew they had a daughter. They never mentioned her until this happened. They utterly failed as parents, showing no care. I can't fathom why they let her die in such agony." Neighbor Robert Blade recalled, "Lacey was friendly and well-mannered, playing with neighborhood kids. Around 14, her parents stopped letting her out alone. I last saw her in 2001, exercising outside, pale, thin, frail." Blade's son remembered Lacey as smart but quirky, fixated on childish things while peers chased cars and celebrities. "I knew her briefly, but it felt off. By 17 or 18, she grew more withdrawn, yet craved playmates, a constant inner conflict." Blade added, 5 years before this, in 2017, I asked Clay about Lacey since I hadn't seen her in years. I assumed she'd moved, but he said, "Oh no, she's still here, doing great," then changed the subject, avoiding details. I dropped it, assuming she'd left town. The Fletchers insisted Lacey's isolation was her choice, not forced. 12 years prior, in 2010, they consulted a doctor about her worsening condition, saying, "She's become very reclusive, staying on the sofa, refusing to get up. We've tried everything to persuade her, but nothing works." The doctor recommended inpatient treatment, but for unknown reasons, they didn't follow through. Evidence suggests Lacey endured 12 years of suffering on that fateful living room sofa. Post-incident, District Attorney Sam D'Aquila prepared to charge the couple with second-degree murder. In the U.S., second-degree murder is a criminal offense involving intentional killing without premeditation, less planned or malicious than first-degree murder. It includes unintentional killings, acts causing serious injury leading to death, or spontaneous killings. Penalties vary by state but are lighter than first-degree murder's mandatory life sentence. The prosecution presented evidence, and a grand jury would decide whether to formally charge them. At the hearing, grand jurors saw photos of Lacey on the sofa, her body covered in waste, with oozing sores and exposed bones. The images unsettled many, leading the jury to indict the couple for second-degree murder, setting bail at $300,000 each. 36 hours later, they paid bail and were released pending trial. Afterward, both resigned from their jobs, perhaps overwhelmed by grief and regret over their daughter's sudden death. What once seemed a happy time became an eternal scar. They declined media interviews, their lawyer stating they didn't want to rub salt in the wound of losing their child, having suffered enough. The trial, set for February 6, 2023, was postponed to June 19, 2023. On May 30, 2023, District Judge Catherine Jones dismissed the second-degree murder charges at a hearing. D'Aquila planned new charges, aiming for a life sentence without parole, proposing a maximum 40-year manslaughter sentence instead. On February 6, 2024, the Fletchers accepted a plea deal for manslaughter, facing up to 40 years. A second-degree murder conviction would have meant life without parole, but the manslaughter plea offered parole eligibility after 40 years, when they'd be over 100 if they survived. Their sentencing occurred on March 20, 2024. In life, parents often show unconditional love for their children, but for poor Lacey, that seemingly sacred bond became the source of a tragedy that eroded her body and spirit. Ultimately, escaping this cruel reality was her only true liberation, granting her peace in a new world. Today's video ends here. See you in the next ones. Goodbye.